Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, Christmas merrymakers. It's time to step out of the tinsel and put down that gingerbread house, just for a little while at least. Take your mind off things and settle into another episode of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And here, all kitted out in a fake beard and big red hat, it's Uncle Jesse from the Dukes of Hazzard. No, wait. It is Matthew Dickerson in perhaps the cheapest Santa suit I think I've ever seen.
I mean, fake beard. I've been working on this beard for at least months. Just don't tug it too hard. Yeah. It's a bit loose in places. So I'm in the Christmas
Comes out
spirit.
in tufts.
We've got Christmas. If people will listen to this podcast on the day it comes out, Christmas Day is overmorrow. I like using that
That's
word.
a lovely word.
It is, yes. The day after tomorrow is technically known as overmorrow. So
Jot that down, folks.
That's right. That's a good one to use around the Christmas Day barbecue. And I've got a bit of a Christmas present, but because it's just before Christmas and people won't get a chance to get it, I'm going to run this Christmas present over the next 4 weeks. I've got a new book that's come out called Tech Talk 2021. Now, what I like to do with my columns that I write, there's 140 mastheads across this nation where I write a weekly technology column. And I like to look at those columns a few years later because it's quite amusing. When you write the column today and you read it today, you go, gee, that's interesting technology I'm talking about. That'll definitely go ahead, maybe, possibly.
But a retrospective on stuff that was a predictive thing almost. Yeah,
that's right.
That's so really interesting.
I normally leave it a couple of years and then release those columns in a book or take the best of those columns and release them in a book. And I actually find it quite amusing going back and reading going, oh, that was just stupid, wasn't it? What was I thinking when I wrote that column? But, of course, you're writing it with the best knowledge of the day.
Yeah, that's right. And that's tempered by, well, all the other things that were happening at the time as well.
Yeah, that's right. And when I read through it, sometimes I go, yeah, that's good. Those things are happening and that thing's really taken off and those things not so much. So it's actually that sort of look back at those columns. But that book is just about to come out. And so what I want to do for our listeners is give away some copies. So for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to give away 20 copies of that book. Now, all I want people to do for that...
Excellent stocking filler.
That's right, except it's going to be after Christmas when they get it.
Post-stocking filler.
That's right. All they've got to do for it is just put a review on whatever podcast app you use. So if you like Apple Podcasts, use that. If you like Spotify, use that. Whatever. I don't mind. Put a review. It doesn't have to be positive. I'd prefer if it was, but we're not going to be prescriptive and say it's got to be positive. You just put a review, send a screenshot of that review to freebook@techtalk.digital. So a good old-fashioned email, freebook@techtalk.digital. Send that screenshot, your name and address, and at the beginning of February, you'll get a lovely copy of that book. It's about 200 pages long of the best of columns going back for Tech Talk 2021.
An awesome retrospective. Yeah.
So that's good. In the Christmas spirit, although sure it would be nice to do that 4 weeks ago. But
look, Boxing Day can last many days, surely.
Surely, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's a nice little surprise after Christmas, a month after. Oh, look at this. I just got this free present. So send those in, the first 20 each week. I'm not going to give
your New Year's resolution out there, for listeners, could be to read more stuff about tech.
Yeah, there you go.
In a retrospective sort of fashion.
That's very specific, isn't it?
But that's an easy one to do. That's an excellent New Year's resolution, easy to fix.
So all I'm saying is that I'm not going to give a book to someone twice, so it's got to be someone different that sends that review in. If you reviewed it in the past, I don't want you to feel like you've missed out, so you can send me an old review if you like. If you've already done a review 2 years ago, then send that review in. Update it if you want, but I feel like sometimes promotions are always about just the new stuff, but I feel it's a bit unfair to people that have done it previously. So if you've done it previously when there's no reward on offer, then just send me a screenshot of that. So basically send a screenshot through and you can get that, say, 20 each week for the next 4 weeks and a bit of a thank you to people as well, but hopefully a bit more interest in some of those columns.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Well, let's get on with this episode. In this Yuletide episode, we're looking to the stars to solve a modern problem with GPS jamming. We're also looking into the merits of getting your head tattooed, and we'll tidy up your email box without causing tears. And finally, we'll take a look at why somebody created a robotic rat. But let's get rolling, or we'll be still here at Christmas time. Is your board games? Are you a board game sort of a family? Do you own a really old Monopoly or Cluedo set with a box that's all worn and torn at the corners, held together by aging tape? Are the ancient classics like chess or backgammon more your style? People have been into board games for thousands of years, and there's a surprising collection of them from the Bronze Age sitting on dusty shelves just in museums. The question is, Matt, what do you do when someone's lost the rule book centuries ago?
Well, it's not even just about losing the rule book centuries ago. That's what the story is about. But my son loves his board games, and when he comes home from time to time, he'll bring some new board games with him. And he brought a board game home one time where the objective was that you didn't tell people the rules. You played the game, one person knew the rules, and as you played the game, you had to work out what the rules were and what different cards meant. And it sounds frustrating, and it was a bit, but it was a different concept
Did
of a board
anyone
game.
get hurt?
No, luckily. They were only soft cards and soft pieces for the board. But,
So you win when you understand the rules?
well, when you do understand the rules, then you can play the game better, and then you can actually go forward. So
right.
it'd be a bit like and which is a very simplistic game, but trying to work out the rules with
Okay.
Even having said that, no one knows the rules for because everyone says, can you pick up and put down straight away? Yes, no. That's enough for people to lose fingers over.
And you've got local rules with
Exactly right.
and local rules with Monopoly too.
Oh, absolutely right. So in this case, I'm sure there were local rules, but we don't really know them. They found board games 4,500 years old.
Wow.
Now, I would have thought 4,500 years ago, I was pretty much focused on getting something to eat, getting somewhere maybe warm to sleep at night. I didn't think I was spending a lot of time going, I've got some leisure time now. I've done the washing, put the microwave on for dinner.
Long hours around the campfire and people thinking, well, I'm not ready to go to sleep yet.
Yeah, probably. So they found in a grave a 4,500-year-old board game. It had a coiled snake board, sounds like snakes and ladders, but it had a bit more than that. 20 spaces, 4 dice, 27 pieces that you move. And so people that found that went, that's an interesting one. I wonder how that works. In Egypt, they found some, again, games that were several thousand years old. And so historians who are probably not focused on board games, they're probably focused on history, didn't know a lot about these. And, of course, bring AI into the picture. Now, AI...
of course.
And this is one thing that AI, we talk a lot about AI, but one thing AI has got the ability to do, and that's know everything. So if you know the rules of, not the local rules, the proper rules, then AI's got access to that. So every board game. So these historians, they said to AI, using all the knowledge you have of every game out there that exists and the rule books of those, here are the pieces for this game. Can you write what the likely rules would be for this game? And it went, sure thing, and created a rule book for these games thousands of years old. Now, were they right? Well, we don't know. But
no one's there to tell them
that's right.
no.
But
Otherwise, they would have shared the rules with them.
Exactly right. But I think the thing is that the historians could use all their experience information, but their experience would be limited to the games that they've played.
That's right.
Whereas AI has got every game sitting there in its memory banks. It's not quite accurate memory banks, but for want of a better expression. So it's got all the information and says, well, with those pieces, this is probably what it would be like. And I'd imagine 4,500 years ago, you probably didn't have a rule book. It would be, okay, James, this is how this game's played. And then you say, okay, Sam, this is how it's played. And then Sam says, okay. And it goes down. And then someone else comes back and plays me and Chinese whispers has taken a bet. No, that's not the rules.
You can't play it like that.
That's right. Well, I was told by so-and-so. Well, I told him the rules. So it's
wonder if there's like a 4,500-year-old get out of jail free card.
Well, they didn't find exactly that, but maybe one of those 27 pieces was the get out of jail free card. So,
escape from your master, no longer a slave.
Well, maybe that's right. If you can beat your master, you can take the death if you get beaten or the escape if you win. Might have been a bit more drastic than that. So these there are more games than I thought that I knew about, never really thought about it before, but more games than I would have thought were around thousands of years ago. So they're feeding lots of these to AI to find out exactly how these games are played.
Well, games are just a form of problem solving in a lot of ways, aren't they? And it's kind of human nature to throw yourself into problem solving.
Well, it's strategic problem solving, and that's what I like about. I'm not a big fan of games that are just straight chance, although you might argue something like Yahtzee, which is obviously very much based on chance. When you've got,
but you still choose what
Correct.
options you're going to take through that. Snakes and ladders might be a form that is just wear it.
Yeah, because you haven't got many choices.
You haven't got a lot of choices.
You move that many spaces and you either go up or down, so that's it. So
Yeah.
I do like games where you've got a bit of strategy involved. So you're right, it's problem solving, it's strategic, it's something, and again, some of the great conversations you have with people are sitting around playing games and just chatting, especially if you've got someone you haven't seen for a while and it might be a bit stiff at the beginning, you can play a game and still chat away.
Yeah, so it's a form of social connection.
Yeah, that's I'd absolutely say that definitely with games. So if you've got an old game out there, you can't find the rule book, just go and ask AI. If it doesn't know, it'll make them up for you.
Do you know, it'd be great to see like a game that you're sure that AI wouldn't have been able to read the rules for. See if it can come up with the rules for that game and see how close it gets.
Well, actually, that's interesting because my son has created a game, a card game, and it's actually not too bad. I've played it with him and it needs a bit of work and a few little things that aren't quite right, but I'll actually say that to him and say, okay, give all this information to AI because these rules aren't published. These are rules that he's made up and see what AI comes up with to see if there's any better suggestions in there. And he's played it a lot with work colleagues to try and refine the rules. And I'm sure that's what happens with games. You keep refining it by playing it.
Well, I remember as a teenager, we bought a game called The History of the Second World War, and literally it took you the length of the Second World War, about 6 years, just to get through the first round. And the rules were so thick. To have AI there and say, no, you just play it like this.
It doesn't sound like that interesting a game. The history of the Second World War.
You had to be a full-on nerd to really want to get into this one.
I'll leave that one with you. Although I suppose if you hadn't ever played Monopoly, you might see the word Monopoly and go, what, you take control? Is that a fun game? Yeah, that sounds like a fun game, actually, doesn't it, taking control?
No, you open this box and all the pieces fell out and the maps and all that sort of stuff, and you just, it was too much. So it seems that ripping fossil fuels out of the ground and setting fire to them isn't the only tax on our ailing planet. There's another environmental woe from the fossil fuel industry that you may not have been aware of. In our hurry to find and trap new oil wells, it seems that oil companies over the last 150 years or so haven't been so diligent in sealing up the ones that they've finished with. And the leakages from old wells are pretty nasty. Matt, just exactly what is the problem here and how can technology help to minimise the damage?
Well, the problem is exactly as you mentioned there, that a lot of these wells, and we're not just talking about a couple, we're talking about since the 1850s in the US, so this isn't worldwide, in the US, there have been about 3.5 million oil and gas wells that have been drilled.
See, that's a number that's really hard to picture in your head.
It is, because I would have, if someone said to me how many, I would have said maybe tens of thousands, maybe not 100,000. That's a lot of holes in the ground.
Tens of thousands sounds about an order of magnitude.
3.5 million. Now, a lot of them, they've obviously pumped out the oil, taken the gas out, whatever, and it's gotten to the point where it's no longer viable. So they just go, okay, we'll just put a little cap over the top of that and away we go. A lot of them haven't been sealed properly and you do get orphan wells. Now, numbers are anywhere from 130,000 unplugged orphan wells to maybe, that's the official figure, but maybe they're saying that maybe 740,000 of those 3.5 million maybe were capped at the time but not capped well enough to seal properly. And then you do get methane being released. We know that's a major problem. We get oil, chemicals, potentially polluting the air, but also maybe some water around that area. So what do you do about all these? You just kind of stick your head in the sand or stick your head down another oil well and pretend they're not there, or do you try and do something about it? Well, the first problem is in the 1850s, they didn't map the location that well. It's probably something where they deliberately didn't map the location that well because they didn't want anyone coming along and stealing the oil from my oil well. So they went, yep, I've got some oil wells over there-ish somewhere, so just leave them alone. Now we're saying, well, we wouldn't mind knowing exactly where these oil wells are so we can go and check on them and go and see what we can do. So researchers have trained a good old AI model. Stop wasting your time with those games. Let's do something a bit more important for the planet. They train our model on some topographical maps, and basically these maps showed about 45 years of various things like oil wells on there. And then go and apply that in terms of look at the topographical maps and look at what the ground looks like around those areas, and then look at maps of the entire US to see if you can find oil wells across there. And of course, AI doing what AI does says, that one looks like one, that one looks like one. So it can actually work out where some of these oil wells are that no one's really taken much notice of. No one's probably aware of them, and so now they can go and look at some of these wells and see what's happening with them. There are so many different aspects of CO2, of climate change, of global warming that we just don't think about. We're so busy focused on...
This is completely new to me, yeah.
Yeah, we're busy focused on the pollution that cars put out, that generating power, all sorts of other things that we do. I didn't say, well, what about those uncapped oil wells? I wonder how big a problem that is, because I didn't think it was much of a problem. But maybe if it was 740,000, maybe it's a much bigger problem than we think. Now, just when they analysed some counties, 4 counties in California and Oklahoma, AI identified 1,301 potential orphan wells that were not on any maps anywhere, and that the topography around that area was such that these are probably orphan wells. So
yeah, and I wonder what it even looks like if you were to come to an orphan well and have and actually spot one and be standing next to one, what it would look like. I mean, what had been done to it? Is it, is there any hint at all that it's an orphan well? Presumably
they've taken away the pumping mechanism, because if I'm an oil company, I can use it somewhere else. So I'm not going to waste that infrastructure.
But if it's 150 years old, even if they had some sort of metal structure there's a chance it's rusted to nothing anyway.
Right, yeah, good point. Yeah. But assuming you took it away, if I'm sitting there and I go, right, I've got all the oil I can out of here, I'll take that pumping machine away and I just stick a bit of concrete or a bit of a slab over the top of that, and off we go. And then, as you say...
Yeah, or it could have just been clay or whatever, and now it's covered with some dirt that just bubbles every now and then.
That's right. Something bubbles up out of it that no one takes much notice of. And someone says, oh, yeah, I know there's a bit of a smell over there. Yeah. Don't know what it is. And you don't think about it. So anyway, it's another way that we're able to slowly address some of the things that we've done to this planet in a pretty short time frame. We seemed to go for many thousands of years, didn't we, before we started really getting drastic with it.
The last 20 years have seen a very lucrative growth in the tattoo market, with seemingly the ratio of inked to non-inked adults in the Western population being at least about 1 in 3 in Australia. Well, tattooing is now making an entry into the field of medicine, albeit temporary tattoos, that is. Matt, I'm not sure if a scalp tattoo is a choice that I'd make beyond absolute necessity, but apparently they're making EEG brain monitoring a lot easier.
It is fascinating, isn't it? And I'm a bit like you. It just seems like everyone you see now, if you haven't got a tat, you're not a human.
You're in a minority.
That's right, absolutely.
No, but, I actually did look it up. It's about 1 in 3, depending on what state you're in. But in Australia, 1 in 3.
So about 33% of people have got a tat.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I must hang around the wrong crowd, so I reckon about 98% of people that I see have got tats.
Well, I mean, and then there's some people who've got them very discreetly tucked away just as a personal thing, but other people have got the body art all over them. So
I must admit, I do like the ones that have, say, for example, their parents' name or their children's name written on their arm.
Just
and you
in
think,
case.
Yeah, you can't remember them. So anyway, apologies to anyone that's got kids or parents' names written on their arm. I'm sure that there's a good reason for that. But I'm not a big fan, I must admit, of tats. I haven't got any, and my kids, thankfully, at this stage have decided not to. It's their choice, but they've all decided not to, thankfully. But if you wanted to get a tat, then this might be the reason you're going to get a tat. This might be something where you say, sorry, Dad, I had to get the tat of that big snake up my arm because I need it for medical reasons. And this is a little bit different. You can actually get, rather than stick on an electrode onto your skull, have your head shaved. And
yeah, it comes with a sort of a glue that gets stuck onto you. For anyone who's had one of these, echocardiograms, yeah.
Yeah, so you get basically wires and gels that stick on there, but they're finding, as you said, a temporary tattoo can be used to then connect up and actually read these EEGs more accurately than sticking on some of the electrodes. So if, for example, you were detecting conditions or diagnosing conditions like epilepsy, brain tumours, if you had a head trauma, for example, then sometimes you will get an EEG. And again, it's just another way that the medical industry is saying, we can do it better, because I actually thought the method of sticking on some electrodes and some wires using a bit of gel seemed like a pretty reasonable sort of method.
Yeah.
But someone said, well, we can get a better reading if we can get closer and get rid of that gel stuff. How can we do this? Well, let's do a temporary tattoo. And it looks quite interesting. I'm not sure if you saw the photos for it.
No, I haven't seen it, no.
But it does look like just a bunch of dot tattoos. They're not very impressive as tattoos. There's no big snake or anything on there, but it's just a bunch of dot tattoos and then some wires coming off these dot tattoos.
Wow.
So it is quite fascinating. And obviously you're getting in a bit deeper to be able to get a better reading of those signals from the brain. So
And a lot of those inks are conductive as well, I think. There's metal base to them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's exactly what they're using in this scenario. So rather than sticking on that electrode and then using some gel to stick it on there, they're just going, well, we'll just tattoo it straight on. So if my kids come home for a tattoo, I'll be asking if they're using them for medical reasons now, because there is an excuse. There is a reason that's right to do it, but I'm not sure if it needs to be done if you're doing it on the inside of your ankle. Maybe there's not so much EEG needed down there.
When you are completely reliant upon GPS for your navigation, then you are highly vulnerable to jamming attacks and left up the metaphorical creek, shall we say. This is a major hurdle for drones, folks. So the solutions lie surprisingly in the ways of the ancient navigators, Matt.
When we had people sailing ships around the world before we had GPS, then they managed to work out that the stars were a pretty good way to navigate around there. And I'm sure there was always the expert on the ship who was the navigator. I'm sure there was someone who was called the navigator on each ship, and they relied totally on the information that this person would obtain from the stars to work out if they were going around in circles or going in the right direction. So fascinating that people worked out so many years ago, hundreds of years ago, they could navigate in this way. Of course, we're all very lazy now. In fact, sometimes I find myself, if I'm in a new city or even a new country and we jump in the car or we get in a taxi and we go somewhere, if someone then said, well, can you get us back? I'd go, I've got no idea how we got here, because I just relied on my phone to tell us how to go. If I didn't have my phone to get me back, I would be completely lost, because you don't take much notice of the visual cues. You used to look at buildings and street names and you'd work out how to get back. But now I find I've lost that skill.
I don't know, how do you go with knowing directions with the position of the sun? Are you okay with all that?
Well, I probably don't take much notice, because
See, this
I'm
is
using
the thing that interests me, because intuitively I always know where north, south, east, west is, just by the position of the sun, knowing what time of day it is.
Which is a bit harder at night time.
It is hard at night time. I get you that. But, yeah.
But I don't think I take notice, because I just rely so much on the phone, and I just go, I'm going there, I'll follow that. Even if we're walking somewhere, I'll just follow that along. So sometimes I go for a run early in the morning if I'm out in a foreign country, just to do a bit of exercise. And I've tried just going, right, I'm going to go down this area, and I don't want to come back the same way. I want to see something different. And I'll loop around and I'll go back until I'm lost, and then I'll pull my phone out. And so I reckon 1 in 3 runs I'll get back to my motel, and the other 2 I'll get back somewhere near there and go, nah, I better pull out my phone. So the problem here is that we've become so used to it that if GPS isn't working for whatever reason, now I'll get to that in a minute why it may not work, but a lot of systems start to have a bit of a problem. Drones, we love drones. Drones are fantastic. What a wonderful piece of technology with all the modern things we've got now. I've actually done some keynote talks where I talk about the drone being a great example of all these various components that have come together to allow us to create a drone that we've got today. 20 years ago, we didn't have the things we needed to have to be able to have a drone. So it's a great example of modern technology. But drones do rely heavily on GPS. In particular, things like just return to home. That's a feature in most drones. Just go back to where you took off from.
I've got a hilarious story about that, about someone who's using their drone for the first time on the back of a boat. I think it was there on the Spirit of Tasmania. And so it started to get out of range. They thought, that's all right, it's going to return to home. And it did return to the spot that they were at.
Now, I want to know if that's a true story, because I've heard that before. I'm not sure if it's an urban myth.
Okay, well, it sounds like a great story.
It is a great story. I need to talk to someone that it actually happened to. But those sort of features, it does rely on GPS. But we know that you can jam a GPS fairly easily. We've talked about it before around the Kremlin, for example. If you're trying to get navigation to areas around the Kremlin, they actually send out false information that's stronger than the satellite signals to make you think you're somewhere different as you get close to the Kremlin. So that's a bit of a problem for you. Not that we're going to visit the Kremlin tomorrow, but in warfare, say Russia, Ukraine, for example, maybe there are some people there who are going, we need to stop these drones attacking us. And jam's probably not the right word, but will jam their signals.
Scrambling,
Scrambling, yeah. We'll put out false information so that drone doesn't know where to go. So some researchers down at the University of South Australia have come up with the idea of a drone using the stars to navigate. Now, again, not much good in daytime, but certainly at night time. So just the same way as those navigators on old ships would look at the stars and work out where they were and which direction they were going, et cetera, a drone is doing the same thing by looking at these stars and navigating. Now, it's not perfect. It's far from perfect, but it's not too bad. At this stage, they've been able to say, we can get that drone accurate to within 4 kilometres. Now, that's not great. Your return to home feature probably isn't going to work that well.
That's a fair sort of a radius.
That's right. Lands at your house going, Matt, what did you send me your drone for? No, I said, come to my place,
But it's a
James.
start. It's using
a start.
an ancient idea to solve a modern problem, and I just think that's amazing.
And when you think about the accuracy of those stars, and when you're sailing a ship 4 kilometres when you're sailing 5,000 kilometres, probably didn't matter that much unless there was maybe a rocky area somewhere you're trying to avoid, but hopefully there's a lighthouse there somewhere, maybe not when you're discovering new land. But essentially 4 kilometres out in the ocean is probably okay. 4 kilometres for a drone isn't perfect. But again, we're talking about a very rudimentary navigation system, and we're talking about researchers coming up with this at the first instance. As you start to get more accuracy and learn how to do it better, I think there's no reason you couldn't get down to within, say, 50 metres, maybe not the centimetres of accuracy that GPS has, but 50 metres, I think that would be a reasonable figure to aim for. I haven't talked to the researchers, so maybe I'm building them up too much here.
But yeah, so we say this is a start. They've realised there's a problem. They work out what the hub of the problem is.
Yeah.
And that's where they get closer towards a solution, like we do with everything.
Exactly right. You get the first version and then you keep building on that. It may not be the researchers from the University of South Australia. It might be someone from somewhere else in the world building information, but it's just fascinating that we've gone back to something from so long ago.
Free Tech Talk book giveaway. Here's your chance to grab a free copy of the latest Tech Talk compilation book in 3 easy steps. Step 1. Listen to any Tech Talk episode, like this one right now. Step 2. Leave a review on your favourite podcast app. Step 3. Email a screenshot of your review to freebook@techtalk.digital with your name and address. The first 20 emails each week for the next 5 weeks receive a free book. Don't wait. You are listening to this podcast right now. Leave a review and send that screenshot to freebook@techtalk.digital. Tech Talk, your gateway to the tech world.
As a child, I remember having a toy rat. It had a little wind-up clockwork mechanism and wheels, and it would scoot across the floor, scaring middle-aged women, mostly my mum, and annoying the cat. They were simpler times back then. But fast forward 45 years, and a retro classic has been given a robotic upgrade, of course. Matt, tell us about this robotic rat and maybe even shed a little light on why.
That's the first question that comes to mind, isn't it?
So someone's gone, we've got to have a robotic rat.
Yeah, and more than a robotic rat, it's got to have a bit of AI, because let's face it, if it hasn't got AI, it's not going to be talked about by you and I. So that seems to be the thing at the moment. The Beijing Institute of Technology in China has decided that a robotic rat is required. Now, part of the reason here is, it kind of sounds good but bad, they're using a lot of rats for scientific research, and often those rats are isolated because they're doing different things to different rats. So they get a bit lonely. Now, that sounds lovely. They're trying to make these rats a little bit less lonely, but they're probably exposing them to various things that maybe aren't the nicest things they're being exposed to anyway. So maybe they're trying to be nice to them while they're not being so nice to them. But what they're doing with AI is they're getting these rats, and again, as you mentioned, they've got wheels on the back, they can move around, they've got little arms at the front. They're getting these rats to mimic the real rats they're interacting with. So their facial expressions, what they do with their arms, they're getting them to mimic them. Right. And what they're finding is the real rats are becoming quite friendly with them because they are as similar to them as possible. And when you think about it, when you're doing something with someone, if you want someone to accept you into the group, then you probably need to be similar to them. That's right, yeah. If you're dramatically different, then people kind of push you off to the side.
So surely things like smell are a big thing as well, yeah?
Well, that's interesting. So they mimic the rat appearances, they mimic the rat movements, they mimic the rat's odour because they put a bit of rat urine.
Oh, of course they do. Of course they do. Because rats stink for a reason.
That's right,
because they just poop and wee everywhere.
So that's it. So that maybe makes them even more acceptable. And maybe, I don't know this one for a fact, but maybe they use a bit of the urine from the rat they're putting them in with, so it does really feel like a comrade, because you smell just like me. You must be okay. So they've done some trials, they've done some tests with this, and again, these real rats are quite friendly. They've got an onboard camera on the robotic rat, so they can see exactly how the interaction goes without humans hanging around. So,
so they're training a rat army to take over the world?
Possibly, that might be part of it. I thought it was quite simple. I thought they were just trying to be nice to the rats. But I think part of it as well is to see the next step. If we want the robots in our homes to do our chores, what will they need to do? I'm not talking about putting human urine on a robot to make it accepted into the home.
Fair enough.
But what will we need it to do? And I think the researchers are discovering from this that the more like us those robots are, the more we'll accept that we've got a robot in our home doing things. I'm happy to accept a robot tomorrow, even if the robot doesn't look or smell like me. I'm okay with that cleaning up the clothes around the house. But if we want them to be accepted in society, it's probably going to be able to, or have to be able to, mimic our facial expressions, mimic what we do, and maybe even learn individually of each individual person. So you get a vanilla version of a robot at your place, and before you know it, it's talking and feeling and sounding a bit like you, and then one at my place is completely different to the one at your place because it's a bit like me. So I think that's part of the big picture here, rather than just making these rats feel less lonely.
Amazing. Modern prosthetics are moving at a rate of knots. Enabling natural movement in an artificial limb is enormously challenging, with motion delays, limiting gestures, force control causing major problems for users. But Matt, this space just keeps getting better and better and better now that we have minimally invasive muscle implants.
It is one of the great things, I think, about the human race, is there are people out there solving a whole range of different problems. And it's not front of my mind to say, how do we solve the problem for someone that doesn't have an arm or a leg or a hand? Because I've got those. But obviously,
look, and prosthetics are another. We've been talking about a lot of ancient things. They're an ancient device. I'm looking for ways to keep people to living as close to the way that they used to. You know, wooden legs for pirates and all that sort of stuff. I mean,
without any pirates,
that's the what was it? The Hollywood version of Treasure Island. Right. But you know, hooks on hands and all that sort of stuff. Well, they're very common. But getting them to function like you need a human's arm to function, that's a big deal. And
it seems a big deal when we've talked about things like Neuralink and having something inserted into your brain, which sounds a bit scary, to get some things working from your brain signalling. But these ones here are at the point now where you're not having to be too invasive in the surgery, have something that's basically a minimally invasive muscle sensor that will look at your muscles that are still operational to then control things further down your arm. So, for example, if you've lost your hand and there's a fair few movements on your hand, you've got all these fingers on there, they can move all sorts of different ways.
But not only that, we've got the power grip and the pressure grip as well. Fine work,
So getting a prosthetic hand, for example, that then you can control without having a brain implant, because that would scare me a little bit. Even though I'm in technology, someone said, just put this in your brain. Elon Musk said it's okay. I'm not sure that I'd be convinced that I love that idea. But having something where it was just sensors on my muscles further up my arm, whatever part of my arm was still there, and then training those. And it doesn't take much training. They found that people were training for about an hour before they could start to do things, so they could open their hand, close their fist, pinch fingers together, do a thumbs up, rotate their wrist around. So not a lot of training to do a fair few different things.
And this is all about neuroplasticity as well. So a thought that you might have used in the past to put your thumb and forefinger together, for example, now might be the thing that moves the elbow up and down. So, but once you get used to doing that, it's just like thinking. Like plain thinking again.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And learning to do it. And obviously you do something new, you play a new musical instrument, for example. Yeah. You're training your brain to make your things, your limbs, do other different things.
Until you don't have to think about it anymore. Correct. You just play yourself an A chord or a B chord.
That's right. Yeah. So in their initial trials, and this is after only an hour, they were finding that they got about 93.8% accuracy for the movements that the person wanted to do, and then got it right. Now, again, that's after an hour. You'd imagine after a couple of days it'd be pretty much 100%. And that was with 11 different hand gestures. So that's not too bad. That's not everything that we can do, but it's not a bad start. So we're getting better and better. We're not quite at the $6 million man yet, where you can just replace everything and you don't realise it. But I do like the idea here, because I think some people would be a bit scared about having surgery where things were put in their arm or in their brain or any part of their body, but having non-invasive or minimally invasive processes in place where you could then say, I can now use something. And I think in a lot of these cases, you probably wouldn't even notice. If a person had a glove on their hand and you saw them moving their hand and picking up things, you wouldn't think twice. And I think that's got to be a large part of it for someone with any type of disability, the stigma associated with it. And someone wants to ask about it. Someone wants to know why they haven't got a hand. How did that happen? What happened in your life? Is that something you were born with? Did you have a terrible accident? But they don't want to ask you. It seems a bit rude, so it sticks in their mind. It must be very frustrating for people that have got any sort of limb missing. And again, if they've got something there where you can't even notice it, then happy days.
You're just looking for normal life.
Normal life, that's right.
If you have a walking aid, or heaven forbid you're confined to a wheelchair, crossing the street, particularly broad streets, must bring on some high level of anxiety. Consider crossing even at the lights. Sometimes that little red man gets the jump quite early and the changeover just isn't enough time to finish the job. Is it any wonder that pedestrians with mobility issues are much more likely to get cleaned up by impatient drivers at crossing lights now? Well, not in Vienna at least, Matt.
Well, you know that I've come back from Japan recently, and Japanese people are very obedient at traffic lights. And
Australians are not.
Australians are not. And I must admit, when I go to Japan early in the morning, when there's not much traffic around, if I'm out for an early morning run, I will get to the pedestrians and I look and I see no cars on the road anywhere, and there's a little red man there staring at me, and I go, I can't do it. I can't stand here and wait. I got to go. Now, I do get some death stares from people around me, but I have joked with Japanese people that they could improve their productivity dramatically if they just went when it was safe to do so. Now, sure, some people might get hit by cars. We'll just take that on the chin. But essentially, people are very obedient there. But the traffic lights are not particularly smart. And when you think about traffic lights in most places around the world, apart from Vienna, you've got some sensors underneath the road, so it detects that a car's parked there, and you've typically got a button, or after COVID, maybe some sort of sensor that a person's sitting there. But it doesn't really know how long you take to get across the road.
No.
It doesn't really know how long those cars are taking to get there. It just goes, I know I've got a car there, and there's some people there. That one's got so much time. Now go to this one for so much time. End of story. But surely, without relying on Japanese people to be disobedient and break the rules, if you had smarter traffic lights that actually not only detected how many people were there and how many cars were there, but how long it took for cars and in particular pedestrians to get across the road.
Well, I've got to say I'm fairly able-bodied, but there are some that where I've started crossing the road and that red man started flashing before you've gotten more than 3 steps. And I thought, well, yeah, that's right. If you're on a wheelchair, good luck to you.
That's right. Wheelchair, walking frame, walking stick, anything like that at all.
And we know once the light goes green for those cars, they're
Get on
going.
the road. That's right. It's your fault for being on the road.
Yeah.
So the idea here is that you've got cameras that detect where people are at, so that the traffic lights will change. And let's face it, it might be the other way as well. You might have a few people standing there and they're all able-bodied and they go across quite quickly, and then it's still green little man and no one's walking across. And again, what a waste of time that is for the car sitting there. So, and I don't go the other way, by the way. If there's a red light for the car, I don't go that one. So I think this is just the first level where we need to get to, where we need to start saying, let's get a bit more productivity out of our humans by saying, let's not stand around and wait at traffic lights all this time. Let's make them more efficient by actually analysing the traffic that's going across there. And of course, AI is sitting behind all this, checking out the numbers, looking at the areas there, and then making the changes as they go. The other thing I do love is when they've got countdowns on them. So when you see it come up, 10, 9, 8, etc., so you know exactly how long. Can I get across there in 10 seconds? Yes, go for it. No, I can't. Just stay here. I do like the traffic lights, and they're not everywhere. There's not a lot of places I've been to that have got the countdown, but I do like the numbers that count down. It just seems to make so much more sense.
Yeah. Now, I'm not going to lie, my email box is a dog's breakfast. It's a source of deep personal shame, and talking about it out loud is part of my therapy. Apologies if you're listening and still haven't responded to you, and I still haven't responded to your email yet, I should say. Well, Google Gemini has a rescue for me. And Matt, I may just be able to come through this year with my 2025 New Year's resolution to tidy up my digital act.
Well, don't waste your time, James. Let Gemini do it for you.
You mean there's a simple solution?
Well, there's a solution. Is it simple? Maybe.
Okay.
Do you trust it? That's another big question.
Right.
So Gemini
I don't
promises
trust myself.
using Gmail to begin with. Obviously, they want people to be in the Google ecosystem, but I'm sure there'll be ways you'll be able to apply this to other inboxes, other things such as Outlook in the future. But the whole idea here is that it will promise to manage your email for you in a more efficient way, in a few different ways. For a start, it'll work out whether that email is time dependent today, this week, this month, so it can shuffle those around depending on when it needs a response. James, I've got this on this afternoon. Can you give me an answer?
There.
Don't let that sit there for a week and then come back and go, oh, I missed that one. If it's something that needs to be done today, let's put it at the top. Let's deal with it today. The other part that it does is it says, who are your important emailers? These people are. Let's put them at the top. And these other ones for that other offer for a pair of heated socks in the middle of summer in Australia, then maybe we could shuffle those ones down to the bottom. And the third thing it does, which I absolutely love, is it says, James, this is a long email. Matthew sent you a whole bunch of stuff here. You don't need to see all that. Here's a summary of that email Matthew sent you.
There you go.
You can have a quick look at that and see whether or not that's enough for you. Or when you catch up with him at dinner tonight, you'll be able to say, yeah, I didn't mind that email you sent me about the blah.
Let's paraphrase a little bit.
That's right.
That's great.
And I go, oh, that's good, James. That was a long email I sent you. I'm impressed you had the time to read it. Anything for you, that's fine.
Do you know, well, I'm a shocker for this because I'll start replying to an email and I'm the guy who gives the long email back.
Right. So I'm going to apply this to my inbox, right? I'm with it now. So I think we do need to get better at managing our inboxes because we do sometimes miss the important ones because sometimes we do get so many things and we subscribe to that thing because one day we might need that product or we get put on various subscription lists that we didn't even ask to get put onto. So you do get lots of stuff that comes through. Sorting that out, making sure you deal with the important ones. And sometimes you become, I feel like, a bit of a slave to your email. If you want to keep it vaguely within the tidy stakes, I'm not sure that any of us can actually claim to have a tidy inbox or ones that we've got everything covered. Because sometimes you have that thing that you know is going to take a while to respond. So you sit there and a week later, 2 weeks later, it's just sitting there nagging at you, annoying you. Gemini, just go and answer that one for me, will you? Just maybe let me read it before it goes back. But I think we're going to see more and more of this where we've got some tools, some AI tools helping us out in just managing, well, all our communications, but in the beginning, definitely our inbox.
So one of the rules of being sick and using the internet is that it's a bad idea to use the latter to diagnose the former. But we still do it. So many of us fall into that Google doctor trap and end up self-diagnosing ourselves with African sleeping sickness or leprosy or Ebola maybe. However, the winds of change are blowing. Online AI doctors are increasing in popularity, perhaps with impatience at extended delays in getting appointments. But for whatever the reason, this is happening. Matt, what is the temperature on this new medical trend?
I've actually got a sore foot at the moment, and I did go to Dr. Google because that's the obvious place to go to diagnose a problem.
Why wouldn't you?
And apparently what I've got is either just at one end of the spectrum, a need to buy more comfortable shoes and just rest for a day or two. At the other end, I've definitely
Leprosy.
Well, I didn't go with leprosy. I must admit that was one I didn't. But I might have gout. I might have plantar fasciitis. I might have cancer, but I could have gangrene and maybe amputation will be necessary. So it seems like a fairly extreme range
You should
there.
just go to a doctor.
What? Well, this is exactly what they're trying to avoid with this one. So there's a French health insurance company called Alan. Never heard of them. Interesting name for a health insurance company, but whatever. The French do what the French will do. And they've started trialling an AI chatbot named Mo. And so far, they've been able to do a few thousand messages and just basically do the initial diagnosis for some of their clients. So people that are insured through them, when they've got a problem, they come through and they talk to Mo. Now, they don't know that Mo is a chatbot. They're letting Mo have this conversation, get some information off them, diagnose this, and then they're doing surveys with these people after they've done some of the initial diagnosis.
Right.
And they're actually getting, sorry about this, doctors, but they're actually getting better scores in their surveys afterwards than the real doctors. They've been happy with the clarity, the comprehensive information. They've been happy with all the information that's come back in the format that has come back. Has been very good in terms of the explanations, and most of it's actually been correct. So they've actually got some doctors there to check.
To double check.
To check, that's right, to make sure that the information that's going out. So they're actually letting the interaction occur, but they've got a team of doctors there who are checking that no more than 15 minutes later. So if you get a diagnosis that says, that's it, you've got cancer, your life's got 15 minutes left, and they're getting back to you within 15 minutes to say no. And so far...
I've got to say, this sounds like a really big leap of faith for me.
It is a big leap of faith. And I think the way I think about this is that when I go and see my doctor and say I've got a sore foot, then my doctor has potentially these 50 different problems. He's got all the ones that I've mentioned and a bunch of others, including leprosy. And so then the doctor will start to ask me a few more questions and might have a feel around of my foot.
Have you been hanging out in leper colonies?
That's right. That's one of the obvious questions I'll get. And then they might do some x-rays or maybe do some ultrasounds, whatever. So they'll use some diagnostic tools to get more information. But what they're doing is they're essentially going through a database in their mind. They've got a variety of options that it could be. And as they ask me questions and get more information, then they're narrowing down what is the possibility. And then sometimes I've been in with doctors before when they go, oh, that's an interesting one. And they pull out a book and look through it. Now, do I think, well, these doctors know what they're talking about? Or do I think, good, I'm glad they're researching this and making sure it's correct?
Yeah.
When you think about an AI, it's got all of these potential ailments and all of the symptoms associated with that. So when AI chatbot says to me, does it hurt here? What happens when you do this? Is it okay when you run but not when you walk? Is it okay when you walk but not when you run? And it's basically narrowing down, doing exactly the same thing as a doctor, but it's got one huge advantage. It's got every possible ailment with all the symptoms associated with that, and it's supposedly just doing a cross-reference and saying, okay, that's narrowed down, this is gone, but this is still a possibility. Right, I've now got down to these 2 or 3 things. It's okay, rest for 3 days, get a pair of comfy shoes, or go and get some more tests done. You definitely need to come in and see a real doctor. So I like that fact about it. Now, I'm pretty sure, and I haven't used it, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to give you an absolute definite diagnosis and say, this is your problem, definitely go and take this medicine or go and take this action based on exactly what I've said. I'm sure it says, here's some likely outcomes and here are the next steps. You need to see a specialist, here's a referral to a specialist, whatever it might be. Out of all the thousands of interactions it's had so far, the doctors, when they were interviewed about how they felt about it, they said that 95% of what they came back with, they were happy with. Now, that's a big number, 5% left over. But the 5%, it wasn't as if they said, no, these were completely wrong. They said, well, I probably would have approached it a little bit differently. I might have said something a bit different. There was only one out of the several thousand they've tested so far. There was one message they said it had something that was potentially dangerous in an inaccuracy. So that's one out of a few thousand. What is interesting is the target, the goal for Mo, according to Alan, is they want to have no more than 1 in 10,000 messages incorrect. And I think, well, that still sounds a bit scary. 1 in 10,000. If I'm the one, I'm not loving that. They can quote stats to me afterwards and they say, well, it's only 1 in 10,000 that we misdiagnosed and that happened to be you, but yeah, I'm not still real happy with that. So then I started thinking...
Still got to touch base with the doctor, yeah?
Yeah, but what is the misdiagnosis rate for a human doctor?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that we have that number, but 1 in 10,000, maybe it is 1 in 10,000 because it's hard for a human doctor to know everything and then go through that process and say, well, it's definitely this based on the things that you've told me. And the one I always find interesting when a doctor says, so how much pain is this? And my pain tolerance level might be different to your pain tolerance level. So I rate it a 6, but you might rate that a...
Rate a 10.
That's right, yeah.
Because it really hurts.
That's right. So that's an interesting one. So you're still using human skills to try and get that information. So it is interesting, but we joke about Dr. Google now. We joke about the fact that every time you go to Dr. Google, you've definitely got cancer and you're going to die tomorrow. So maybe with a dedicated medical chatbot, maybe, I suppose part of the thing here would be that I would see this taking some of the burden off doctors for that initial diagnosis, for that initial visit where it's just go in, you see the doctor, by the way, how about this, and this. The thing I do feel like you might miss is sometimes you might go to the doctor because you've got a sore foot and the doctor says, let me have a look at that spot on your face. Oh, that's a bit interesting. We might just take care of that while we're here. And by the way, what's wrong with your foot? So you're going to miss that if you have a chatbot that's going to have a conversation with you. The chatbot's probably not going to say, James, your face, there's a little spot there. You've been in the sun too much. So there's that potential as well.
And I wonder, this is why so many men don't go to see the doctor. With so many things that are just actually really nothing.
And so if my chatbot says, stop wasting my time, it's nothing, you got a sore foot, you stubbed your toe last week, you big Nancy.
Maybe real doctors actually look forward to those because they're nice and easy.
Yeah, that's right. I thought doctors would look forward to ones where they can say, here, I'll give you this or I'll do this for you and your problem's solved straight away. Maybe they're the ones that are good as the doctor. So it's interesting, but I absolutely definitely see a time not too far down the track where we will go to a medical chatbot. It might be a service we pay for. We might even go into a doctor's surgery and actually use the chatbot there that you can't access online, and you use it there in the surgery to get that initial diagnosis. So when you walk into the doctor, you've already got some of that initial stuff out of the road, so you're maximising the incredible skills the doctor's got, maximising their time rather than chatting about things that are irrelevant. You're getting to the real nitty-gritty of it.
Winds of change are blowing. And that's all we have for you today. If you're still Christmas prepping, then it's time to find your focus again, folks, because you need to get busy and get that job done for the sake of everyone and Christmas this year. But if you're super organised and you're done with all that, then just lean into that warm Christmassy mirth and pour yourself another cool Christmassy drink. But no peeking at the prezzies until it's time, folks. Merry Christmas, Matt. May your lounge room abound with messy unwrappings and tech gadgetry knickknacks.
How many of the 20 items in our 6G for Christmas have you looked at, thought about? Because I must admit I did send that to my kids and they promised me.
I want most of them, so I'm not buying them for other people because I'm expecting to get them myself.
Well, I have said that to my kids and I know I've got some coming. I don't know which ones out of that. And there's some that I want to buy for myself, but I'm going to wait till after Christmas Day and see how I go there.
It's a game of patience, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It
in
is.
In a society where we get instant gratification.
I'm going to get some instant gratification shortly because I'm going to sit in front of my computer. I'm going to wait for those first 20 reviews to come in. Free book at techtalk.digital.
Bingo.
And wait for those so I can give away 20 free books. And that'll make me feel good because it is actually quite nice giving presents to people. So
it is. Spirit of Christmas.
Thank you for your wonderful efforts this year. Merry Christmas to you, absolutely. But Merry Christmas to all of our listeners. Thank you for tuning in. We put a lot of time and effort into this and I love the various bits of feedback we get throughout the year. But at this time of year, as at any time of the year, why can't we be friendly the whole time of the year? But Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And absolutely, we'll have lots more fun stuff for you after Christmas. And I look forward to hearing people that got some of those presents off the 6G for Christmas guide.
Thank you, people, for tuning in to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. We're not done for 2024 just yet, though. There's another Monday to come before New Year, which makes us the gift that just keeps on giving. I'm your host, James Eddy. Merry Christmas to you all. I hope that the season is kind to you and that you get to be with the people that you do the things with that make you the happiest. And even if Christmas isn't your thing, I hope you get a little time to enjoy to yourself and with your family. Also, do the things that make you happy. You deserve it. Take care. We'll see you again